Recording in progress.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our Orbital Prime Ask Me Anything. A quick introduction to myself, Lieutenant Colonel Brian Holt, go by Trend. I am the co-lead of Orbital Prime, as many folks might know, and my additional co-lead here, Mr. Gabe Mounts. I'll turn it over to you for a quick introduction, Gabe.
Hey everybody, Gabe Mounts here. I am the Deputy Director of SpaceWERX, supporting Lieutenant Colonel Walter McMillan, who goes by Rock, the SpaceWERX Director. And we got our team here from Orbital Prime ready to ask or answer. You guys are asking, we're ready to answer your questions for this Orbital Prime Direct to Phase 2 that is now open and that we hope to give you some info about.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Real quick, so the solicitation opened up on the 25th of October and will close on the 22nd of November. I'm getting a little bit of feedback from someone. But yeah, the 22nd of November, it'll close. Again, I just wanted to put out my personal apologies. I know that this, Dan, I think your keyboard is very loud.
Sorry.
Okay, let's see here. Where was I? Yeah, I just wanted to again apologize that the solicitation, again, for reasons outside of our control, kind of came out the last minute. So we appreciate everyone's hard work in making sure that that you can get opportunities. So we wanted to do this AMA kind of last minute and make sure that we were here to answer questions. So I won't delay much longer, and just so we can get to your questions as soon as possible. I wanted to introduce Rob and Ellen from BMNT. They're going to be helping facilitate this Ask Me Anything today. And then we have the rest of our Orbital Prime team on, Andrew, Gretchen, and Cameron. Cameron will be leading basically this solicitation as kind of the main project manager for this. So that's kind of the core team here. And Rob, maybe over to you to get us going.
Sure. Well, just hi everybody. Again, Rob Ronsley with BM&T partners working with SpaceWERX team on this. So as we get into this, we'll kick off the Q&A session. So if you saw in the chat, please put any questions throughout the presentation into the Q&A, and we'll have a larger Q&A session there. But I'll just kick it back over to Gabe. You can open us up and introduce what's going on.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So I think many of you, hopefully, if you have been watching the various communications and publicity channels that the SpaceWERX team, the AFWERX team has been using, just a quick kind of set the context of why we're doing this. SpaceWERX, as the space element of AFWERX, has launched the Orbital Prime program in order to really prime the pump on a commercial market, what we had originally established or thought of as a nascent commercial market that, if matured, would have benefit to national security space. We initiated that program with an offering to small businesses called an STTR Phase 1, a Small Business Technology Transfer Opportunity. And in that opportunity, that Phase 1 opportunity, we were really looking for small businesses that were partnering with research institutions to more or less enter our pipeline through that opportunity. That is still ongoing. Many companies out there working under that STTR Phase 1. And so now we are in the throes of offering this SBIR Phase 2, direct to Phase 2 opportunity. So I'll kick it over to Trent for further description here.
Yeah. So again, if you haven't seen the solicitation, it's on the DCIPS portal that we can push out here in the chat if needed. For this, we are looking to award roughly a 15-month period of performance. And I think the maximum contract value will be roughly $1.7 million. Again, this is a direct to Phase 2. I know we'll get into some of these questions as we get going on eligibility, but I do want to say a lot of the details of eligibility are listed on both the solicitation and on the DCIP portal. In short, if you have previous work that's been done as a Phase 1 activity, and you have accomplished a feasibility study that isn't purely SIB or sitter, and again, if contracting team Danielle needs to jump in at any point, please do. Then you're eligible to apply for this direct to phase 2. So I know that's a big question that we'll get into more details here, but I wanted to kind of just hit it off at the top. The second big one is the evaluation criteria. So there's, we'll get into those, but there's basically 3. And then the MOU requirement that we'll cover in more detail. There's, just to set it up front, there's not an MOU requirement for this orbital prime effort. But again, I just wanted to put these kind of 3 strategic things out there. But now we'll get into the questions in a little more detail, and we can answer those more specifically. So yeah, that's all I had. Maybe back to Rob or Ellen, unless you had anything else, Gabe.
Let me just maybe also describe this overarching orbital prime strategy using essentially the AFWERX SIBR-SITR process, right? The Department of the Air Force through AFWERX essentially now operates the SIBR-SITR pipeline, the small business pipeline, where we are essentially trying to work and connect with the small business community and industry base to really find really innovative solutions that could be used by the Air Force and the Space Force. In this case, for Orbital Prime, we're leveraging that SIBR-SITR pipeline to onboard capabilities from the small business community that could help get after the in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing technology area, with the stated goal, if you've seen our charts, for an eventual demonstration of active debris remediation. This direct to phase 2 opportunity is one of the on-ramps. The STTR was the other on-ramps. Both of these opportunities will eventually lead to an opportunity for those performers selected to go after a STRATFI award later down in our strategy. And those times and dates for that STRATFI have not yet been set, nor has the budget fully, but I just wanted to kind of give an overview of where this is ultimately leading. That STRATFI enables companies, hopefully at that point in time, to better facilitate some kind of on-orbit demonstration. So with that, yeah, let's start going into some questions.
Great. So I can see already there's a lot of really great questions coming into the Q&A. So just a couple of kind of big picture stuff to just kick us off and selfishly take the first few questions for myself. So, I mean, you've already touched on all of this, but since some of it's really important, just wanted to just focus in on, so the difference is there's several companies that are already in the phase 1 STTR pipeline now. And there's a bunch of companies that could be looking at the direct to phase 2 solicitation that's out now. So for this direct to phase 2, is the expectation that some of those phase 1s could be looking at this? Who is eligible for this and who's not eligible? What are the overlaps between these 2 tracks practically?
Yeah, so I'll take a first hit at that. And really the way I kind of look at this is if you've done, again, if you have a technology that has already accomplished a feasibility study, which is equivalent to what you would do in the phase 1 type work, then you would be eligible to apply for the direct to phase 2. I think at a very specific level for our 124 awardees that are currently in the STTR phase 1 pipeline, for that specific technology or work that you're doing, I do not believe that you'd be directly eligible to go into this direct phase with that specific technology. I think we recommend that you finish your period of performance, and then the STTR phase 2 opening will follow the back end of that phase 1 period of performance. And again, so the only caveat is if you are a company that has other technology that again has already completed that phase 1 type work, again, a feasibility study, then you would be eligible to apply for that technology. So that's my description. Gabe or Daniel, did I misspeak at all?
I think I'll just read that first sentence from the DSIP solicitation, if you don't mind, to kind of really hammer this home. The phase 2, this directive phase 2 is to develop, install, integrate, or otherwise demonstrate a prototype system determined to be the most feasible solution during the phase 1 type feasibility study. So we're looking for that level of effort in the direct to phase 2, and how we count that phase 1 type is pretty broad. But as Trent mentioned, I'll back him up by saying that if you're a current performer on the STTR phase 1, most of those period of performance have not yet ended. That scope of work does not necessarily qualify you to compete for this SBIR phase 2. But if there are other kinds of efforts and other kinds of capabilities that are being developed or that you have worked, that can be demonstrated in your application for this direct to phase 2, it doesn't, the phase 1 type, the quotes there doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a SBIR that you've done that work under. It could be a multitude of other ways that you could accomplish that work. That's what you would apply, and we would consider that as part of that phase 2. Dan, anything else you want to say to clarify?
Yeah, just to add on to that. So basically the idea with the direct to phase 2, as everyone has said, is that the feasibility was accomplished under, not under a prior SBIR funding agreement. So if you had a phase 1 for the technical solution that you're proposing as part of your DGP2, that can form part of the basis. But really for a D2P2, we're also looking for additional work that has gone on outside of the SBIR space to demonstrate the feasibility of the technical solutions that are being proposed in phase 2.
Great. And so sounds loud and clear, but to clarify, so for those on the phase 1 track for STTRs, they're still on track for their phase 2. Nothing impacts that, right? Doesn't change their traditional trajectory.
Right.
Cool. Perfect. And so other kind of bigger topic thing, thinking about the evaluation criteria. Can you talk a little bit more about that? There's one question in the chat already asking about what sort of commercialization criteria is interesting to put in an application.
Sure. Yeah, Rob. So let me go up to a higher level first, and hit the 3 evaluation criteria, which are all equally weighted. And I'm kind of paraphrasing these, so they're very specifically written into the solicitation. Potential for government or private sector commercialization, the defense need. Again, there's not a required MOU for that. And then finally, technical merit. And when those 3 things, again, equally weighted, are equal, and if there's an equal matching, then cost would come down to that determining factor. So again, those are the 3 very high level criteria. So I'll pause there and see if anyone else has any comments.
Anyone else from the SpaceWERX team wanted to add to that?
Well, yeah, Rob. So I guess your more specific question was, what type of commercialization would we like to see? I don't know if I have a very good answer for that. Maybe Gabe, you have some thoughts on what that specifically means to you.
I believe it's just evidence to show that there is a commercial traction pathway. How does the tech you're working capability lead to commercialization, is the way we often say it. And so that is not necessarily a focused, distinct way. There's multiple ways you can prove that you're getting commercial traction, but that's what we're looking for.
Right.
Great. And in the chat, someone missed the 3rd one. They recognized that there were 3 evaluation criteria: commercialization, technical merit, and the 3rd was defense need. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, in this case, you'll notice defense need, because this topic is ISAM, which is in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. That defense need really is stated right there in the title. The applicability to ISAM.
Great. And with that, could you speak to some questions already about, is there specific sub-elements within ISAM? Is there any specific technology groups that you're looking at, or how broad is the aperture for this?
So this topic was based off of our initial orbital prime strategy work. And if you go to our website, the SpaceWERX website, spacewerx.us, look at the tab that says prime. It'll be the orbital prime, essentially program described there. And there's a graphic that we have been using that describes the 3 technology tracks, which really encompass the capability areas that we are interested in within ISAM. So we consider them to sort of be one and the same.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that again is that I think there's an increment here where mainly the in-space servicing piece, the servicing aspect of this has to grow and be developed first. And I think that's where more of the technology kind of is today. And then it would evolve into the assembly and manufacturing piece. But we're not specifically excluding anything at this point, but that graphic does outline a few but servicing types that can be done. And again, our interest as one of those subsets are also in active debris removal.
Great. And so I've seen a couple of people ask about how many awards can be expected to be given out and what the budget looks like. Any thoughts on that for how big this directed phase 2 will be?
So the budget, the final budget numbers have not been quite completed yet, but we're looking at multiple dozens of awards for this directed phase 2.
Awesome. Well, so that's kind of covers my curated list of questions. I don't know if we're going to open up to the SpaceWERX team to kind of pow through the Q&A and just kind of open up the conversation. So any other questions that the audience has? Happy to make this two-way.
Hey, Gabe, we got one more question. It's the general question was asking if when the application is submitted for this proposal, can they use variations in terms of similar core technology, but all in support of submit multiple different proposals?
Yeah, I think I might have to interpret the question a bit. It sounds like what you're saying is, can they propose various capabilities maybe that are based on some core technology area at the end of the day? I'm not sure if the question is, can they submit multiple proposals that describe different capabilities that ultimately have the same maybe core tech capability? Is there a way to find that out?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this, and we had this question a lot for the first STTR phase 1s. I think it's always, if there's a strong business case for multiple proposals and it's clearly differentiated between them and easy for the eval team to understand those, I think then it makes sense. If not, instead of submitting multiple proposals, it's probably best to put a good amount of work into the one and make it the story very, very clean. So that's kind of how we addressed it on the first phase.
Yeah, and just to add to, even if you're submitting proposals that are kind of essentially equivalent, each of those proposals will be evaluated separately. So I think that kind of goes to Trent's point, like make sure when you're making that tactical decision of whether to submit one or multiple, you're sort of thinking about the fact that the proposals will not be read in conjunction. Each one will be evaluated against the criteria in the solicitation.
And the next question we got in the queue is, are the primary focus areas still on-orbit approach, on-orbit object acquisition, and on-orbit object service as they were for the phase 1 STTR?
Yeah, I think at a conceptual level that those are still accurate. Again, those are mainly guides to help communicate and tell the story of this problem area. They're still very applicable, but I would say that even a little bit as a step up from that the ISAM market and dual use is more specifically where this is focused. At least this direct phase 2 is focused. So,
Yeah, I'll say that's a good way to put it as a guide, because the way the solicitation is written, right, it's to develop, install, integrate, or otherwise demonstrate a prototype system determined to be the most feasible solution. And the title of that is for in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. So if the evaluators are looking at your proposal and they're trying to understand if you're offering that as defined in their mind, what's servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, which is still rather broad, but still also pretty specific. That's what you're going to have to drive home, is how does this address in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing?
Okay, the next question is future StratFi opportunity only geared towards these D2P2s, or are the continued phase twos from the current Orbital Prime phase ones also eligible for future StratFi?
Yeah, the short answer is anybody in the STTR pipeline, assuming you make it into the phase 2 STTR opportunity, too early to tell that, right? But assuming you make it to that phase 2 STTR opportunity, you will also be able to compete for that later StratFi opportunity.
Next question we have is, are there guidelines or templates for progress reports for SpaceWERX contracts? And if so, could we find them?
I'm trying to understand that question again. Can you say it one more time, Andrew?
Are there guidelines or templates for progress reports for SpaceWERX contracts? And if so, where could we find those if they're available?
Okay, so what I'll say to that, and again, this is just my thoughts on that question. Just like the phase 1 contracts that were awarded, there are CLINs that are outlined and very specifically, provide the format and all those type of things. The same thing will happen for this direct to phase 2. So I think those CLIN definitions will help outline that.
Yeah, and I think maybe that individual is talking specifically about like a form 1423-1, like contract data requirement list, and there is not a CDRL associated with those submissions.
Okay, next question is, do we need to submit a pitch deck as part of the technical volume or just a white paper?
I don't believe a pitch deck is required, but I could be mistaken. I don't believe so.
That is correct. There's no pitch deck required.
Great. I thought I saw a question in here about a MOU from like Strat or Spacecom, I believe it was. I don't know where that question went, but I thought it was a good one. I again, if the proposee already has a customer memorandum or anything like that, again, I don't think that we're going to be again, it's not required to have an MOU. What I was trying to articulate is that if you already have one, I would assume that your storyline and your use case and everything like that would be very succinct, because you already have this, you've already had that conversation. But again, it's not a hard requirement, and I don't think we would be able to evaluate it any other way.
Yeah, I mean, it basically at that point would be evaluated kind of as a letter of support. I think that's fair to say, as opposed to just a typical customer memorandum on like an open topic direct to phase 2, in which the customer memorandum would be an actual box check requirement and then would be evaluated as part of the defense need.
You want me to field a few of those questions there? I see in the QA left.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a few here of the security infrastructure. I would say, we're not going to rule out if you're going to propose something that's sort of a support to ISAM, an ISAM capability. So in this case, security infrastructure, how do you provide data, or how does the data infrastructure, IT infrastructure, whatever that might be, command and control infrastructure, support ISAM? I'm not saying that you shouldn't propose that, but I think what the evaluator is going to be looking for is that end prototype for space, servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. So it might be that if you're providing some kind of supporting element to that ISAM, there could be some people in the evaluation stream that might discount that. And as far as who are the evaluators will be a mix of subject matter experts from Air Force Research Lab, from people, Space Systems Command, as well as just other space acquisition and space operation experts. As far as the StratFi rules, I don't believe right now there's any difference. We're not planning any difference in a StratFi opportunity to what is a normal StratFi opportunity. And yes, they do require the StratFi opportunity. If you go to, I'm not sure who has ready at their fingertips the right website address to describe the StratFi opportunity, but it's a 1-to-1 to 2 matching opportunity. So basically, the SBIR funds as one match to some government program funds to a 2 match from a private sector funding stream.
Somebody in the Q&A asked if a member of the Orbital Prime team could put the URL for the current solicitation into the chat. So if one of the team could do that, would be great. Another asked about the project period for the D2P2, saying it's described, the solicitation says the period is 15 months. And they asked, does this time include report writing and preparation?
Yeah. So that includes both, that includes holistically the period of performance for both technical and reporting is 15 months.
Okay. Another question is, how do we find and make connections to the program executive officers to help with StratFi and TACFi MOU endorsement? I don't know if you have any strategy thoughts on that.
Well, since we're not, personally, I believe we're not at that phase yet for StratFi TACFi when it comes to this Orbital Prime program. So I think that's too premature for us to work at this point in time. What the expectation is that performers that get into the direct to phase 2 or performers in the STTR phase 2 opportunity within that work will probably be opportunities to then create the right mechanisms for StratFi applications, but it's way too premature at this point, I think, to worry about any of that. I do see a question just real quick for clarity that somebody's asking to put the SpaceWERX website Prime so that they can look at just that tab at the SpaceWERX.us website to read through and see some of the graphics that are listed there.
I will add that to the chat.
And I think you actually already touched on this a little bit, but it did pop up a couple of times again, and it was answered individually. But if some of the companies are using some of the same technologies or elements in their Orbital Prime Phase 1, but plan to use that for a different use case, are they then eligible if they have done feasibility another way, or should they be looking at new technologies? What does that gray boundary look like?
Rob, can you ask that one again?
Sure. Yeah. So we're asking about some phase 1 awardees have kind of underlying technology that's part of their phase 1 or their STTR program, and they're wondering if they're using the same technology but in a different way or for a different use case. Is that something that could be eligible for this directive phase 2, or is that too close?
Looks like Dan's raising his hand to answer.
Yeah, Dan's the best one to answer that.
I can. Yeah, so there obviously are going to be a little bit of gray areas sometimes. I mean, just basically the crux of it is that the entire feasibility determination cannot be based solely on work that was funded with prior SpaceWERX. So as part of the new use case, if there was additional feasibility, work done outside of a SIPR funding agreement, that would satisfy that requirement. Basically, conceptually, what we don't want to do ever with a D2P2 of award of any kind is supplant or subvert the traditional phase 2 contracting process. So the thought being that if you received a phase 1 award for a particular technology or technical solution, you would then follow the traditional SIPR path of getting a phase 2 award that derives from, completes the work derived or started under a prior funding agreement. So we understand obviously that these are close calls. So of course, any work that feasibility demonstration that was done under prior SIPR funding agreements can be part of it. Where is that line? I don't know that there really is a direct one, just so long as there is a robust demonstration of feasibility that is not directly dependent upon prior SIPR work. I mean, and if I'm going to be honest with you, I think at some points this is it's a question of drafting, right? Of explanation, right? If the proposal, there are times, again, because we're only evaluating the proposals that are in front of us, even though you can propose the cert or you can imagine a certain amount of expertise on behalf of the reviewers, they're not going to know about your particular technology. So unless there's a compelling demonstration or explanation as to why the feasibility determination can rely upon work done outside the SIPR program, it won't be presumed. So where is that line? I don't really know, but it just goes to the compelling justification that's included in the proposal.
Okay, so yes, I see this question here about kind of the larger timelines for getting awardees on contract. Let me try to do the best I can on this. Again, this is all not guaranteed, but again, the solicitation will close out on the 22nd of November. Evaluations will happen shortly thereafter. And I believe we would be looking to have the period of performances and awards start in early February, at the start of February of 2023. So that's my understanding of the timeline. And I think I saw Daniel nod a little bit. So
it's a little tricky over the holidays and such, but yeah, that's late January, early February is when it's scheduled. So, and we have, that's notional, but still pretty quick.
Great. And there's also a couple questions that came in from YouTube that are in the chat. So I'm just trying to put those out there, make sure they get their questions asked. First question, I'm not sure that I understand the context of it, but the question is, how can we get letters of support from SpaceWERX? Is this something that's required for this solicitation?
No, so this, just to be clear, the SpaceWERX enterprise is an element of AFWERX already. And so because AFWERX, which encompasses SpaceWERX, is running the SIPR process, is running the execution of this process, we would not provide letters of support because we are actually using this solicitation to figure out who we want to select, right? So the SpaceWERX team would not be providing letters of support.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Another one from YouTube. What are the restrictions of technology from Taiwan and China? Specifically asking about GPU variants from NVIDIA chips that process our algorithms, which are not fabricated within the continental US. They're asking, how is this being addressed? Any guidance on this stuff?
I think there's I think there's pretty robust guidance. I can certainly provide the text of the SIPR reauthorization bill. If I'm going to be really honest with you, we have to be careful advising you because, quite frankly, these are really close legal questions. If you have a question about the availability of particular parts that you're proposing as part of a technical solution, of course, we'll help to the extent that we can, but there are actual, kind of compliance-based legal resources out there that exist for this purpose, just because these are often close calls. And the penalties, as you all know, can be very stiff for violating things like Buy American, ITAR, and to say nothing of the SBIR reauthorization statute when it comes into questions of eligibility.
Great. And I think this is probably for an STTR question, but a couple people have asked about collaborations with universities. One did ask if they had been planning to do an STTR direct to phase 2, if they had set up a relationship there, is it appropriate to bring in a research institute partner for an SBIR?
You definitely can. Yep. It's not, what's cool is in the STTR, that the sort of forcing function in the STTR is that you do partner with a research institution. The SBIR opportunity, this direct to phase 2, you don't have to, but man, it's that, nothing prevents us from looking at that or any other partner you want to bring to bear.
So with that, there was another question asking if collaboration with foreign universities, in this case, European universities, is that allowed or encouraged?
The best I can answer is it's dictated by the requirements of the SBIR process and call, which I don't fully, that's down in the legal realm. I can't personally answer. So maybe Dan can provide some light on that.
Yeah, again, that's another one that's close because any, whether your solution is ITAR restricted, that's going to change the answer. All SBIR work has to be performed within the continental United States. That's when we get this question, that's usually how it comes up. So if you're proposing a foreign teaming partner or a foreign university, that usually presents problems when it comes to the actual physical location of the work. And then, for anyone else, because I saw another question about like a subsidiary, any of the owners of any owners that are being proposed to satisfy eligibility requirements have to satisfy eligibility requirements. That's kind of the short answer for that one as well. So again, you're not encouraged, you're not prohibited from a European university, but I don't know how technically you get around that when it comes to all of the work, even at the subcontract level, taking place within the continental United States.
Great. On a different track, somebody asked if the award amounts will be similar for these direct to phase 2s to the STTR phase 2s that will be coming later.
Yeah, our intent is to put those at a similar budget of up to 1.7.
Okay. There was a question that was up that looked pretty interesting, but it just disappeared. I know, just Andrew or Gretchen, were there any questions that you saw that you wanted to elevate?
I think while they're looking, I saw one about someone was asking about the 124 contracts. It was kind of related to the previous question. I would say that our intent is to, again, award multiple dozen awards out of that STTR or out of the STTR phase 1s to the STTR phase 2s, if that answers that question that was on YouTube.
I'll maybe follow that trend here with the fact that for the STTR phase 1 performers, since there's already a bevy of performers within that sort of STTR ecosystem, there'll be more communication with those performers as to the phase 2 opportunities for that track. For the general public, that kind of doesn't matter because if you don't have the phase 1 STTR, you can't compete for that phase 2 STTR. Because with this webinar is really for this direct to phase 2, which is right now open call, then that's more I think we're here to kind of address that more than that phase 2 STTR opportunity.
Yeah.
Great. I see one of the questions came back. Could you speak a bit more about what you have in mind for a prototype demonstration? And they ask, could it be a CDR level system designed for a full system or subsystem? Essentially, what level of hardware development do you envision?
Yeah, I think bear with us. I'm reading through the solicitation to see if there's anything in there that lends to an answer for you.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. So stand by.
Cameron, while they're doing that, I have a question that looks coming from YouTube side. Is there a link to where the selection criteria are described as well as the required components of the application?
Yeah, it's in the solicitation CSO PDF that's out there. I thought we put that into the main chat. We can do that again. All those criteria in the 23.4 CSO PDF. Okay. Any other questions on YouTube that we can address while we're looking? Yeah, so I think while we're kind of just looking here, again, I'm on the DSIP site. The definition of phase 2 is pretty well described there. And the exact wording is demonstrate a prototype system determined to be the most feasible. I think the question was specifically asking like a CDR level prototype. I think it would need to be something a little bit beyond CDR in my mind. Again, I think it's up for interpretation, but a demonstration of a prototype system, I think the word prototype system implies something more than CDR, but
I would just say that's maybe the term prototype as it's used within the SBIR program isn't necessarily a defined term. It's more of a term of art, kind of to your point.
And I think you already answered this, but it was asked again. When do you expect proposals to be selected?
Zephyr, I think you're off mute there. Selected, and we're looking at awarding and period of performance starting roughly end of January, early February of 2023.
And I actually, sorry to go back to the previous question, I just popped a definition of prototype from the SBIR Setter Policy Directive into the chat. Again, it's broad. So, I mean, again, it's still kind of to be read as a term of art.
Right. And then another question that's been asked in a couple of spots. Can you speak to the process for assigning and matching TPOCs to selected proposals?
Yeah, that process will be developed likely after we go through the evaluation process. Part of the way this process works is we will be recruiting. We really already have recruited a bevy of evaluators. That is still ongoing, not definitive yet. And probably a lot of those cases, many of the evaluators will eventually become the TPOCs, but I guess rest assured it will be a combination of people from SpaceWERX team, from the Air Force Research Lab, across the lab, Space Systems Command, and perhaps some of the other space agency partners. But that hasn't fully been decided yet.
So there's one question in here that I think might pop up a couple times. I see Daniel is answering a lot of questions directly. So if the audience is looking in the Q&As, you can see a lot of answers to these. But just in case people aren't seeing that, just to hear it, share it out loud. Will a letter of commitment from a partner company along with a robust statement of work and cost volume suffice? Or is, essentially the question is a teaming agreement, subcontractor agreement required explicitly? And Daniel, you already answered this, but if you wanted to point that out again.
Yeah, so it's, I'm trying to find the actual page in the solicitation for you on that. We do ask for it, and I only say that because the reason we ask for it is that it goes to proposal evaluation for cost reasonability, fair and reasonability. It's not probably going to be used as part of the technical evaluation, so it just makes your award timelines for when you actually, if you are selected for award, go a lot quicker, because we will eventually, prior to award, need a copy of that agreement. And if you provide it with a proposal, then that makes it a little bit faster. I am aware of the realities that a lot of times that these teaming agreements are the condition precedent is that the proposal itself is selected for award. So you will not be disqualified for not having it, but it would behoove you to have it as part of your initial proposal submission to the extent that you can.
And Daniel, let me follow up with that. Is that that's really accounting for when you are, I'm air quoting here because I don't want to get the wrong technical word here, but when you're partnering with a company that will also be receiving funds through the program, right? As opposed to any other partners you have that are just, you know, basically interested parties, maybe parties to help commercialization. Anybody who's not getting paid, there's not a teaming arrangement necessarily that has to be put in place. Okay.
No, I mean, because that would be sort of going out into your own company's portfolio of work, and we don't require that level of granularity.
Team, we've got just a clarification question. Once again, it's the phase 1 feasibility analysis required to be eligible for the D2P2 cannot be an analysis performed during the phase 1 STR work effort, ? And then the latter part is the feasibility analysis for this must be independent of any other SBIR work.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the variation of the question we've kind of gotten a few times. It just cannot be the phase 1 work cannot be the sole basis of the feasibility determination. So if you only have a showing of feasibility because you got a prior phase 1 award, that's not going to be sufficient for purposes of a D2P2 proposal. If you have done a feasibility demonstration partially based on a phase 1 award and then gone off on your own, invested your own money or gotten other commercial sources of funding, and that makes part of the feasibility showing of the technical solution for which you're proposing to the D2P2, that would be different.
And maybe I can also follow up here with you to say, if you are an STTR phase 1 performer for the Orbital Prime program, and you're wanting to use that work to apply directly to the direct to phase 2, and you just want to use this as an opportunity to get to the direct to phase 2, just using that, probably going to be disqualified.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I guess I didn't catch that it was specific to STTR. So an STTR phase 1 award will be treated the same as a SBIR phase 1 award for purposes, because it's all kind of the same pot of money.
One of the other questions that was in the chat, so I didn't see it, but is anything, just broadly, are there any major differences between StratVi via Orbital Prime as opposed to the traditional open StratVi?
There's not really a difference in the way it's executed or any of the procedural things or any of that. Probably the only potential difference is that SpaceWERX will ultimately budget money against StratFi opportunities, and there will be a specific pot of that money for StratFis that are really to receive proposals from this Orbital Prime bevy of performers. So I guess maybe put this another way, whenever those StratFis come out, opportunities come out later down the road, I'm not even sure I could even define the time. At that point in time, there will, if the budget is appropriate, there may be other StratFi opportunities also available just in the normal StratFi world, if you will, that won't be necessarily counted as part of Orbital Prime, just kind of what I would label kind of generic. Depends on budget, and depends on when we get down to that point in time to put those opportunities on the street.
Here's a broader ISAM question, considering that obviously Orbital Prime kickstarted with active debris removal in mind. Is there a preference for a particular orbit, or can technology also apply to geo, cislunar, or even lunar surface applications?
In short, no preference.
No preference. And this is part of this is probably a good point to point out. That's why the term ISAM is being used in terms of, in space. The keyword is the first part there. and then also pointing to the national ISAM strategy that's out there and available publicly as well. So, but Gabe said it more concisely.
So I'm seeing more kind of foreign material procurement questions from countries like Australia, from the UK, or allied, countries required. And someone just asked if there was any just resources that they could be linked to, any guides on dealing with non-US materials or components. Is that something that could be provided?
I can certainly look into it. I don't have any handy, to be quite frank. Again, because compliance with that stuff is this much, something that we deal with in the SBIR program. But obviously, I know for all of you applicants, it's a big question because you want to make sure that you're sourcing from authorized places. So I can look into that. I might release it as part of the Q&A feature on DSIP. So look right there. It wouldn't be like a solicitation amendment or anything, but if I turn up something that I think is worthwhile, worth your time, I looked all over the SBIR site. I don't believe that there are SBIR specific resources for that, but that doesn't mean that such resources don't exist. So I'll look into it for you.
We've got also an interesting question here for considering the commercialization requirements or things that will be evaluated on. If all of their R&D efforts to date have been funded strictly through SBIR funds, is that something that would limit their score and their ability to apply for this when they go to direct to phase 2?
So yeah, I mean, I would say just as a general, if we're asking like kind of as an academic question, yes. I mean, because it would be the point of a SBIR of a D2P2 is to provide an entry ramp into technologies that did not have their feasibility demonstrated by prior SpaceWERX. So the traditional route for technologies that were developed using SBIR phase 1 funding to go to phase 2 would be to just go the traditional cohort route, whereas the D2P2 is just something different. I mean, it's just a different beast entirely. It's kind of a different on-ramp. It's more akin, honestly, insofar as awarding it is concerned, to a phase 1. Kind of just think of it that way. It is the feasibility study and the phase 2 kind of in one award because the feasibility is already done outside of the SBIR program. So.
Awesome. Andrew, Gretchen, any other questions that we missed?
No, it looks like there's nothing more in the YouTube chat or in the Q&A, unless the team has any final remarks. We want to wrap things up.
There was a question there. I guess it got dismissed. Maybe Trent can help. It was a NASA question about ISS. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did see that. So looking at it through two ways. One, from what I remember seeing, if the technology or proposal is in support of the ISS or any in space human operations that are already taking place, then I think that's an obvious yes. That's as long as there's a dual use, which you could probably make the case for. If it was more specific to humans in flight, then there's obviously a whole nother kind of process that needs to be understood. And it is outlined in the solicitation in terms of familiarization with definitions and procedures required for human subject testing. So again, not knowing exactly where that question was going, that's kind of my take on both angles of that one. I see it back here. Anything associated to manned space, a no-go. I would say the short answer is if you associated with or in support of manned space would probably, I think is of interest. So that's my answer.
Thanks, Trent.
See an interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as we get close to wrapping up, Daniel was kind enough to put his email address in the chat. So I don't know if someone can put that onto the YouTube as well for those who want to see that. But obviously a great source of information. So do feel free to follow up if something wasn't answered here today.
There is
Gabe,
a question about launch here. If you don't mind,
go
we
for
can
it.
try to address that. The team recommending providing. We really can't necessarily recommend from the government side or how we go through this process. But the intent of the Orbital Prime team is to, as best as we can, facilitate or at least the right interactions with the opportunities that we know about. But we aren't intending necessarily through this program to be and bake into the program necessarily our own version of a launch provision per se. I think the expectation is that a lot of that would be part of your commercialization plan as a private company. So I think that's the best way for us to answer it here.
Well, great. I think this is probably a good point to start to wrap up. I appreciate everyone's time, both from the audience and very specifically Daniel. Thank you for joining. It's great to have someone on with your expertise, so we appreciate that. And again, my kind of final comments here are just again, this solicitation will close on the 22nd November, and we look forward to seeing the proposals. Gabe, any final comments?
Yeah, totally agree. We're looking forward to the proposals that come in through this, and just really interested in seeing how the commercial sector here continues to evolve. Just really happy with what we're seeing happening in industry, and glad to be part of it in some small way. Yeah, let me do that. The great point. So next week we'll be having AFWERX will be having another Ask Me Anything for what I would say is the overarching direct-to-phase opportunity that they are running. The more generic one, if you will. If you look at that DSEP page, you'll see two opportunities. One is what I would call the more generic opportunity, and then one is the specific one to Orbital Prime. So make sure you join that if you just want to learn more about how to apply for that more generic direct-to-phase 2 across a host of desires and capabilities, more of an open call there. I believe we are going to try to have a member of our team as part of that panel so that if there are any people interested in the Orbital Prime direct-to-phase 2, but that's a good opportunity just to learn more about the overarching program and the way AFWERX runs that opening and that opportunity. So what's the exact times? Anybody online know the exact times of that next week? Next Wednesday, I believe. Thursday. Sorry.
I think that is too. I should know. I'm going to be on it, but a little embarrassing moment for me.
Awesome. Hope to see everyone there. Great.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.